Thank you all for being here. Hope you, for those of you that were able to attend the keynote today, that you found it inspiring. My name is Dr. James Tromans, and I lead the Google Cloud's overall Web3 efforts here. And it's my pleasure to be joined by three co-founders of different protocols, and we'll be talking to Mo, Arthur, and Leemon for the next 45 minutes or so today. To set a little bit of context, obviously there has been a huge amount of investment into these two spaces that are very topical, AI and Web3, over the past 5-10 years. And of course, what we see today is just above the surface, and there's a ton of effort that's been going on for decades that's paved the way to enable us to be where we are today. But of course, as generative AI in particular has started to take mind share from all other areas of technology, I think that there is a huge amount of opportunity that lives across the span of AI and Web3. And whether that's AI for Web3 or whether that's Web3 for AI, as we will talk a little bit about today. So I'm going to just ask our panelists to briefly introduce themselves individually, and then we'll jump into it. So Mo, why don't you start us off?
Sure. Hey everyone, I'm Mo, co-founder and CEO of Aptos Labs. My background comes from working in the finance industry. I worked at places like BlackRock and also at BCG, where I helped sovereign wealth funds deploy capital. Ultimately stumbled into crypto in 2016. Been in the Ethereum ecosystem for quite some time. Saw some of the challenges of launching financial instruments on the Ethereum ecosystem, and ultimately joined a company called Facebook, or a project called Libra, led by a company led by Facebook. And that led us to thinking about how payments and money could potentially be revolutionized. Fast forward, we faced some challenges, and we now are an independent company. We're Aptos, based in the Bay Area, 150 people with 16 of them having PhDs in various fields. But when we think about what Web3 can do, or what a protocol can do, and especially at the intersection of AI, we know we need to take a very serious approach to building a protocol that's stable, that's reliable, and scalable. We did that for billions of people when we were, in our Facebook days, and excited to obviously continue on that path independently, and happy to get into that.
Thanks, Mo. Arthur?
Hi, everyone. My name is Arthur Breitman. I'm a co-founder of the Tezos project. So Tezos is a decentralized ecosystem. It's a blockchain, an open source piece of software, meaning anyone can come in and participate on a Tezos blockchain. A bit about my own background. My background is in quantitative finance. I worked in statistical arbitrage, high-frequency trading, all this nice stuff for large financial institutions like Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs. I also worked a little bit in robotics at Google, actually. I was a research engineer at Google X, and then the project became Waymo. And I started working on Tezos very early on in 2014. The chain launched in 2018. It was the first major proof-of-stake protocol with economic incentives to launch. We are also, I think, the first protocol to truly scale with an approach that we've developed over the past couple of years. And so if you're looking today at Web3, I would say the most important thing is what is the value prop, because we've seen a lot of technology being built, and sometimes the value proposition is not really clearly articulated. Compared to what you might find in traditional approaches or traditional services, the value prop is a decentralization, is censorship resistance, right? It's a raison d'etre for this entire technology. And this is, I think, where Tezos really shines. It's been built from the ground up with community participation in mind. It's a blockchain that can evolve, meaning that the participants of the network can vote on upgrade. It's not controlled by a company. It's not controlled by a centralized entity. It's a decentralized system, and we've gone now through about 14 upgrades, which is why we started out strong with the proof-of-stake approach, and this has also enabled us to really keep with the days and now to embark on this scaling journey.
Thank you, Arthur.
Cool.
Leemon.
Waymo, that's cool. I didn't know about that. That's really neat. I love that. So I'm the co-founder of Hedera. In 2015 is when I made the hash graph algorithm, and so we built Hedera with that. Hedera hash graph uses that. And so I'm in the blockchain world now, but I actually got my PhD in AI, which is kind of cool. So we're doing the intersection of one of my two loves with the other one, which is just kind of neat. But I was doing reinforcement learning and deep learning, which back then nobody knew about, and today it's just doing all sorts of things. You know, you beat the world's Go player and that top Go player, that kind of thing. And so it's just exciting to be on a panel where I get to do both of the things I think are really cool.
Wonderful. So often in these sorts of panels, you get this really frustrating question like, what is Web3? So we're gonna skip that question, and we're gonna go to use cases. Just quick fire question to get us all warmed up. So top of mind for you three. Tell us a quick, nice use case that you like within your respective chains or Web3 more broadly. We'll start with Mo.
Sure. You know, one of the biggest use case for us goes back again to our roots of thinking about money movement. And in order for that to happen, we think about all the different components that need to work well. If I want to be able to send money to James when he's in London and I'm sitting in New York, or now the Bay Area, there's a lot of complexity in between. And as a result of that complexity, there are a lot of costs. And so whether in 2016, when I kind of first got into the space, it was two central banks sending money to each other and wanted to do it on a blockchain. That was a great starting point. And how do you scale that to people where it really matters? And so we endeavored on that journey. And today, money can be sent from me to you across the world with sub-second finality.
I like that it's from you to me.
Yeah, we need to fix that flow actually. And if James wants to send that money back to me, it can happen in under a second. And that's really important because you need a reliable protocol to be able to basically match the demand of today's speed and time. Fast forward, you need good provisions to make that happen. You need proper credentialing. James needs to know who Mo is before he sends that money over and validate that. And so while Aptos is also not only thinking about building a protocol that's fast and that has incredibly low latency and evolves, it needs to be a secure and safe space. That credentialing isn't something we work on independently. We're working with partners like MasterCard on that. And so that's very exciting for us. Building on top of that, beyond going for money movement, now imagine opening up financial access to the broader universe. And so if someone wanted to own a piece of a money market fund, for example, as an alternative to just holding US dollars and potentially having yield, you can do that next, and you can go through a second set of KYC on our chain. And this isn't hypothetical and something that's going to happen tomorrow, in the future. Franklin Templeton is actually tokenizing a money market fund on Aptos.
Right.
And these are some very interesting financial use cases that are quite fascinating, not only for the world, but also for us, because it shows that a protocol is not something, and Web3 isn't something in the distant future, it's actually here today.
Absolutely. Arthur?
Yeah, absolutely, and I agree. We're in an industry where there's a tendency to focus on, what use cases are going to come next, what will happen. But we are actually seeing people using this network today. Now, you ask, what's your favorite use case? Yeah. And there's been many use cases on Tezos recently. The Tezos blockchain has been used by the California DMV for doing title tracking. It's been used for tokenization, like we mentioned, by Société Générale, by Bank BTG Pactual in Brazil. So we've had a lot of these I would say very corporate use cases that exist. It's been used by gaming companies like Ubisoft. But if we just go and my favorite, what I really enjoy is there's a huge art community on Tezos, visual artists, and we're talking about the intersection of AI, and it actually started with a lot of generative artists. Now you can use all these AI models to generate almost perfect images, but when it was just in its infancy and people were playing with this, a lot of these artists who naturally produce digital images as an output found Tezos as a home for creating, experimenting, and exchanging. And so it might not be as it's not corporate like those other basic uses, but in terms of the soul and the heart, what's my favorite, I would say that's what it is.
That's a great, lovely answer, and we'll talk more about Web3 for AI in a minute. Leemon, love to hear your thoughts too.
Yeah, so there's really two different classes of things that are being built on ledgers right now, and we have some very interesting use cases that I get excited about. One is tokenizing. I do think that ledgers are eventually going to tokenize everything of value in the world because it's just so much more efficient. It disintermediates and it's easier and more secure. And ultimately, everything of value will be tokenized. And what we're seeing is new kinds of things, like you can have a market in carbon credits which is rife with fraud right now, but you can use Hedera, and people are building markets for tokenizing carbon credits that eliminate certain types of fraud. They just become impossible. And then they can also do things like, well, you tokenize green energy, or you tokenize non-green energy, and you tokenize the carbon credit, and you glue them together. And then you have a single token that's both dirty energy with enough carbon credits to offset it, to turn it into clean energy. These are the new kinds of things that really, before DLTs, before ledgers existed, were not happening and maybe weren't easy to ever happen. And this is the kind of way it's changing the world, is tokenization. We're going to see more and more of that, and we're seeing huge amounts of that. I met someone who tokenized their house on Hedera. It's just amazing what you can do. And you can say, well, why do that? We already have houses. But you can do a title search very fast. You can do interesting things that have never existed, like you sell tokens that are shares of your house, and then you pay rent, and it goes to those people. It's not a mortgage from a bank. It's democratizing mortgages even. It's allowing ordinary people to buy pieces of your house, and then you just pay rent to them. Whole new business models can be created by tokenization. And that's only one of the two major things that DLTs can do. They can also be storing information immutably forever, where you know the whole world sees the same thing. So you can do things like in supply chain, and the whole world can see what happened. We have the health services in England are putting on Hedera the temperature of COVID vaccines of all the refrigerators they went through before it got to you. So you can look at the serial number and you can see what was its temperature in all those refrigerators, because they were automatically measuring it and then recording it for posterity on Hedera. And so you can see in the past, where was it, and it can never be changed. You know that the whole world is seeing the same thing. They can't cook the books and show you one set of books and show someone else a different set. You have a unified view of it. You have it time-stamped. You have it provably then. I think this also is an incredibly important way that ledgers are going to change the world. And I'm excited to see that happening on Hedera as well.
Lovely examples, all of you. I want to shift the conversation just very slightly to AI. And we'll start with you, Leemon. So I think what we're seeing in the world of applied AI right now into the corporate and consumer space is really just the outcome of a ton of work over the history. And obviously you have your PhD in this. So do you think that there's any sort of one specific thing that's led to this particular point in time now that we're all beginning to hear and enjoy the benefits of, say, large language models? And then I'll ask you some follow-up questions and the rest of the panel as well, but just like to hear that from you straight away.
Yes, AI is an overnight success that has taken many decades to build. It's absolutely true. So I would really say there's four things that are leading to these sudden successes we're seeing. So we have ChatGPT doing text generation, and then you have things with diffusion doing image generation. And then we had before that, AI was able to beat the world champion in Go, and that same program, the same program can teach itself in a day to play chess better than anyone on the planet, or teach itself to play video games better than anyone on the planet, or teach itself to run a robot that can fold cloth, which, let me tell you, is really hard, and is one of the reasons that humans have been doing sweatshops with sewing machines, and it's going to transition to robots. That's a different issue. But all of these things are based on really four big breakthroughs. You have LLMs, and you have diffusion-generated images, generative AI for images. Those two things really are in the last 5 years. You have a really cool paper. Attention is all you need. You have some very cool things. There's really two breakthroughs for that. But then we also have reinforcement learning and deep learning, convolutional neural networks. And that in the 90s, when I was getting my PhD, I was all excited about, because it was clear those two breakthroughs were going to totally change the world. Okay, it took a couple decades, but now we're here and we're seeing it totally change the world. Tesla's about to roll out a car that doesn't have any human programming, from the cameras all the way to the steering wheel. It's pure neural networks. This is an interesting time we are alive in right now.
Love the answer. And for the audience, the work that you mentioned with Go is DeepMind, Google DeepMind. The Attention is All You Need paper, one of the co-authors of that founded another protocol called NEAR. So Google has been around and involved in these spaces for a long time. And I think our appetite now with Web3 and AI together is where we're trying to help folks like yourselves and our customers. So with that AI and Web3 connection, where do you think we're going here? Is it AI for Web3, or is it Web3 for AI? And we'll ask the whole panelists this question, but we'll start with you, Leemon.
Okay, so some people would say there is no intersection at all, or you could say there is an intersection, and if there is it AI helping Web3 be better, or is it Web3 helping AI be better? I think that overall we're mostly going to see Web3 helping AI. Now, there's a little bit that AI can help Web3. You can have AI kind of looking at smart contract code and looking for bugs, or looking at the code of the validators themselves and looking for bugs, but that's just tooling, and it's sort of AI is going to help the whole universe, and it helps that too. It's not really AI helping Web3. It's going to be too expensive, I think, to have the L1 ledger itself running gigantic neural network models to do something, and you want it to be predictable anyway. So I really think that AI won't be helping Web3 as much as Web3 will be helping AI. Right now, the biggest concern in AI, well, one of several gigantic concerns, is the data, the training data. It's only as good as the training data. You get biases because of training data, and you have copyright issues because of training data. People put training data online for free, and then the AI people use it, and then they complain, wait, you used my data without permission, but you put it online for free. And now my logo is appearing in some of your generated images. Oops. This is an issue. And I think in the long term, what we really need to do is have everyone who's providing data digitally assert this is reliable data. If you trust me, you can trust my data, and give permissions. Here is who can use my data for their AI and under what circumstances, and do I want a royalty payment or not? And then maybe every time you use this system, the AI system, you pay a millionth of a cent royalty payment to that person. Okay, that's just totally impractical if you have to write them a check. It's totally impractical. But with Web3, you could automate this, and you could actually pay them a millionth of a cent every time someone uses it. And you could actually record their permissions on how you can use their data, and when they change it, you stop using their data because they took away the permission. So I do think that just as Web3 is going to change every aspect of society, it's going to change AI as well. And maybe the data and the payments of royalties is a big part of it.
Love that. Arthur.
A couple of things. So, in terms of what's enabled this, yes, it's been decades and decades of work in AI, but there's clearly been a huge acceleration in the past couple of years. And if I had to distill, I would say the key insight here, yes, the attention paper and the transformer architecture has been extremely important because it allowed to parallelize training. So you could do training at massive scale. But even more important than that, if you had, I would say, to keep like one insight, I would say it's been the scaling curves. And the scaling curve, which I would say you would probably credit OpenAI for discovering, they've come from looking at models and growing the size of the model and trying to see how well the model is going to predict text or any other aspect as you make it bigger. And they started noticing that the scaling curve was actually holding through many orders of magnitude. And at that point, that's where you're saying like, wow, maybe we should do a training run and spend $5 million on compute for training this thing. And this was something that was very uncommon. This was an era where I remember when some of the first really impressive deep learning results came in Vision with AlexNet, for example. Like people were of the mindset that a deep learning model was something you would train on a GPU as in just one machine, and the idea of spending so much in compute was unheard of because we didn't really see that it could actually get you to something very, very, very powerful. So that I think is a key insight. And like when people have realized that now, they're saying like, okay, let's do training runs with tens of thousands of GPUs. Let's do that on petabytes of internet data. And that, I think, really is a key insight that turns things around. In terms of Web3 and AI, an intersection, I think you see them side by side, the two technologies, and you are going to see some Web3 project, and they're going to have some AI component, some Web3 component. I don't think that necessarily potentiate themselves very much. Like Leemon said, you don't want to bring fuzzy artificial intelligence inside your ledger. Your ledger is accounting. You don't want to be creative with accounting. You want to be very, very predictable and very straightforward. There are areas where interesting, but one thing we didn't do is define Web3. And part of what is Web3? So 90% it's a marketing term, and that's all right. It's better words than crypto. People didn't like the word crypto, and also I think crypto should belong to cryptographers, right? That's right. So let's say it's Web3. But if you had to to go at the essence of like what has been trying to capture at its worst is just marketing. At its best, it's an approach to the web where communities are owning some of the platforms that they contribute to, and so a lot of people have been thinking in terms of like fan communities or creator communities or social media. And one aspect of social media that has been very centralizing in the past has been curation, collaborative filtering. You go on a social media platform, you don't want to see everything that's on the platform. You want to see a selection of that. So algorithmic feeds, for example, have been very, very popular, or search, for Google, obviously. Like you want to have a subset of all this information. And the approach to that has been, well, one entity has all of the data, and then they can train these powerful models on all this data, and then they can curate something for you. But now the things they're going to curate is not necessarily always what you would want as a user. And if you are trying to have a small community-owned platform, or like a collection of many community-owned platforms, what do you do for curation? And those AI models, what they can do is they can do curation from content. You can have content-based creation. You can literally take an AI, have a look of the message, and ask, is that something I would enjoy reading about? Or, does this movie seem interesting to watch? You can do this directly from content, as opposed to just saying, well, we have 100 million users and 50 million users like this, so you're probably going to like it. That changes a lot, I would say, of the accessible business models for social media, and that I think can potentially Web3. So in this instance, it would be something like AI doing something for Web3. And of course, there's smaller things. I've mentioned one of my favorite use cases on Tezos was the art community, and that has been, AI generated art has been a big topic. I think AI generated music is going to be even bigger, because arts, I would say that the community around art is absolutely fantastic, but it's smaller. But art is upstream of culture, and culture is huge, and culture has music, and everyone listens to and collect music. And so music AI is going to come around, and this is where it gets really interesting with intersection. So I don't think, I wish the intersection was bigger, because my background is also in AI, so not to contribute. I don't think it's like a giant synergies that there's there, but definitely we're going to see both technologies being used, and I'm excited about both.
Wonderful. We'll come back to training data and provenance shortly, but Mo, I'd love to hear your thoughts too.
Yeah, so my classical training is not in AI, rather embedded in business models and what really makes sense for the individual user that is sitting in your seat. What problem is an enterprise trying to solve? Although I do agree with what Leemon said, I think things like federated learning become much more interesting. There's a lot more trust, and AI benefits a lot from Web3. But Web3 does also benefit from AI, right? You can have developing a smart contract it can become easier, it can become more trustworthy, there can be less margin for error, and obviously less cost and time to deploy a Web3 application, which has been a lot of a pain point for enterprise developers today. And so that's, I think, very powerful, and something we're working on with partners in the space today. Can I say something controversial?
Please.
Okay. All right. So he's not going to throw me off the stage now. So you have that. I think AI and going off of what Arthur said, Web3 is this kind of massive disruptive force. It is this decentralization component that you talked about, where the people are now empowered to do things and no longer have to be handcuffed by the incumbents. Maybe someone that has a large amount of data, and so. When we have partners that come to us, we ask them, what are some of those challenges that you're looking to solve? We had a very large media and entertainment company come to us and say, we want to market our movie, but in order to do that, we have to buy all these ads. And we get single-digit conversion. Blew millions of dollars, and maybe a few people walk through those theater doors. And so that's not an efficient use of capital for them, and it's not obviously great outcomes for anybody. Instead, what they decided to do is come to us and say, hey, can we launch a game where people can engage with that game and we can learn about who is interested in playing this game? We did this with NBC. Folks came and played a game for this particular movie launch, and now NBC knows, Mo, James, Arthur, Leemon like this type of game. It's a Dracula-based game. And maybe we're interested in playing these types of fields, and maybe we can market a movie catered to a Dracula-based fan. And so you have someone like NBC sitting in the background that's running their own models and trying to understand how do they more efficiently target us as moviegoers. Instead of buying millions of dollars of ads, they have much more confidence, higher conversion rates, and reduce the spend and improve margins, essentially. And that's a real-world solution with AI and Web3 today, and we think that's the most exciting thing for us. And so, a little bit of my favorite use case, going back to that point, extending that to ticketing. where we're working with folks like Demi Lovato and Pitbull on solving just this problem. They don't want to go to Ticketmaster, where Ticketmaster owns all this information, very famously in court right now, so it's all public. And they want to have these fans, or these creators want a direct relationship with their fans. And so how do they build that relationship? They can actually target, again, they can work with us, launch a ticketing solution, have that relationship directly with the fan goer. They have a wallet, they know what Mo has been doing in other places as well, and they can now start to draw insights as to what they want to build in terms of content in the future, where they want to have shows, and then obviously use some sort of natural language to query what outcomes that they might want to get. And so this extends into quite a disruptive force that isn't, again, something happening in the future, it's happening right now. And if you guys are in your seats thinking about whether you're on the enterprise side, how can you, again, improve margins, improve outcomes, or even sell more tickets? These are things that I think the world's largest companies are trying to solve today, and we think that's exciting at the intersection of AI and Web3.
So personalization, you've touched on this topic of personalization as well, like understanding the customer. CRM, been around a long time in traditional enterprise. I'd like to go a little bit deeper on this topic. So do you feel that the role of Web3, the ledger, the information that's there, the existing AI and machine learning techniques, doesn't have to be LLMs incidentally, right, that we can apply and have been applying to all of the data we already have, how do these things come together? And do you think that they are a good fit? Do you think that there's something net new hidden in there? What are your thoughts? And we'll start with Arthur.
Yeah, so I guess it comes back to personalization and the fact that the way we've done personalization in the past has been largely with collaborative filtering. So you have a lot of items and you have a lot of users. And then you say, well, a lot of these users like these items and you like similar items, so you probably like these users. And that's how Netflix will give you ratings based on like what you like, and they see other people who like this, like that. And for that to work, you need to do it at a certain scale, right? You need to centralize all of this information and to be able to produce that. Once you start looking at content directly, you can have something that's a lot more fine-grained than this. You can essentially have either agents or systems which are loyal to the user and which can be customized to the user. So it's not just about knowing about you specifically, but also knowing about what you want to see, knowing about how you want the system to behave, like how you want to be shown things. And I think that that flips a lot of the social media practices on their head. In terms of personalization, I would say that there's something about enabling people to create content, enabling people to participate, and I would say that's the main element you get out of Web3. One thing to bear in mind, and just to zoom out, is like, what is the technology? At the end of the day, you have a ledger technology. It's easily verifiable, but fundamentally it exists to solve one problem, right? It exists to solve a double spending problem. If you don't have a double spending problem, the sad truth is you probably don't need a ledger. And that's something that's often forgotten. So, we've talked about supply chain solutions, and it depends if we interpret Web3 as narrowly being about blockchains and DLTs, or if it's bigger than that. If we're talking about digital signatures, for example, so if you have a whole supply chain, and you manage to digitize your entire supply chain, and you manage to say, well, if you're going, you're going to like scan this crate, you will do a digital signature, you do all of that. And then at the end of the day, yes, you'll have a lot of benefit for doing that. And sure, you can put it on a blockchain, but that's not really what's driving the value of the fact that you've digitized your entire supply chain in the first place, right? A lot of these trust components and trust issues, they really become important once assets come into play and once ownership actually changes hand. So this is why I think that although there are interesting use cases in this area, the ones which are really about very customer-centric, really about users and how they can get personalized experience are probably, I would say, a stronger fit for the underlying technology. Now, one of the reasons we haven't really seen all that much is because blockchains historically haven't really scaled, right? So you'll see, for example, Ethereum top out at 12 transactions per second. Every time we've had waves of adoption, they've hit the fact that the fees get really expensive. So historically, there's been this tension between centralization, where you basically use the same systems of old with just a little more cryptography on top of them, or new systems which are decentralized. And it's only in the recent years that we've seen technology enabling this decentralized system to actually scale and process millions or billions of transactions.
Leemon.
Yeah, so how is AI going to be personalizing in our field? I think this is the same way it's going to be personalizing everything in our life. So I've seen a company that built something that runs on Hedera, or is like a wallet for Hedera, where you talk to it through ChatGPT, and you just tell it what you want to have happen, and it figures out what transactions would have to make that happen on the ledger, and then it shows you on the screen the transaction it's about to submit, and you approve it. That last step is kind of important.
Yeah.
ChatGPT will lie, it will hallucinate, it will do horrible things to you, but it's great for, like what you were saying, filtering. If it gets it wrong, who cares? It doesn't hurt you. So what you want it to do is be an assistant who will say, okay, I think this is what you want me to do. Now, here it is in very clear language, not written by an AI. Click yes or no on it. That kind of personalization is good. And then you get something like Siri on your phone that isn't terrible anymore. It's more like the computer on Star Trek that can just basically understand anything you want and do anything you want. That kind of personalization is coming for users. Maybe equally important is the same kind of personalization for the developers and engineers and builders who are building the system. So we have engineers who will use Copilot, for example, which will write little snippets of code. They often are wrong, but it saves time. I've had engineers tell me on our team that what they'll do is they'll write a little snippet of code, then they go back and they fix the parts that are wrong, and that actually ends up net saving you time. So it can't do something you don't understand because then you couldn't check it. It can only do things you already know. It can only do things that you would have been able to do, and it's pretty stupid. But it helps. It saves time. And I think we're going to see more of that. What I'm even more interested in, though, like one of the XKCD comic strips said, you know, in software engineering, how do I put this? We're not very good at what we do. Code has bugs, and it happens all over the place, and we know this from our apps and our ledgers and our wallets down to the operating systems and even the chips sometimes can't divide. That was a long time ago. But we see bugs throughout the system. The only solution is formal methods where you actually have a math proof that it's correct and a computer checks your math proof. Spoiler alert, that's really hard to do. Really, really hard to do. People are doing it, but it's incredibly hard to do. For Hedera, we have the hash graph algorithm that we have a proof that it's ABFT, it's really secure, asynchronous Byzantine fault tolerant. That proof is complicated. And so what we did is it was very laborious. It took a professor at CMU, a year to do it, but he ended up putting it in the computer, in COQ, in a way that the computer could check the proof. And then it proved it was correct. And the next step now will be to take the code that implements it and have the computer prove that it is correct or generate it in a way that's correct. This is something that's being done in a tiny sliver of the software industry right now, but not very widely because it's incredibly expensive. The cost per line of code is just through the roof. I think AI may actually make this practical. And there, you don't have to worry about the AI making mistakes because the AI tries to make a proof, and then you have your little program that checks proofs, and it sees if it was right or wrong.
Right.
And you know for sure it's right if that little program says it's right. So I think customization for our developers is going to be equally big as customization for our users, maybe even bigger.
Lovely answer. There's a couple of things in there that I'd like to talk about, and we have approximately 10 minutes left. So some of the innovation that's been taking place in the field has led to the kind of unearthing of things that were happening in the 70s, certainly in the 80s and 90s. And we're beginning to see the fruits of that labor coming good now. So when we talk about multi-party computation, we talk about zero-knowledge proofs. Do you feel that these technologies, as we think about data privacy, in the context of AI, have some sort of synergies, and how will they support one another? And I'll start with Arthur, and then we'll take it from there.
There's really interesting technologies that have been built around and revived, I would say, around blockchain. Zero-knowledge proof were known, but they were largely an academic tool. They weren't really being used for many things, and all of a sudden they found practical use. Same thing with secure multi-party computation, homomorphic encryption.
Yep.
That being said, if we're looking at the intersection of data privacy and AI, and current AI is not very soluble in data privacy. A lot of these solutions involving homomorphic encryption or secure multi-party computation, in practice, they have an overhead which is so high that it's not going to be practical. It's already extremely compute intensive to use these large models. If on top of that, you're trying to add 3 or 4 orders of magnitude of slowdown, that will work. So Another type of solution that have been also explored a lot by in the Web3/crypto industry has been trusted computing, so TEE, secure enclaves,
right.
SGX.
Yeah.
There's a great thing about this and a terrible thing about this. So the great thing about it is like it's simple. You run on a machine. It's you can have it on a cloud. You can have it everywhere, and you have no slowdown, and it gives you the data privacy and everything that you need. That's a great part about it. The bad part about it is it doesn't quite work today. People keep finding bugs in it, and people keep finding ways to exploit it. I don't think there's something fundamentally wrong with the technology. It's because it's fairly new and people are banging on it and like finding the problems. But I think it's like in every generation it's getting better and better. And if we see, so we've seen crypto solutions based on those systems, and I think for data privacy and AI, we'll also see that where the model runs in a way that it guarantees that your data stays encrypted and is not revealed to anyone as you get the result from your computation. And in fact, like if another Google moment, I think if you're trying to do these things, the Android enclave is actually a great way to do it because you can actually do machine learning in an Android enclave on Android phone better than you would be able to do that with SGX, for example, on a CPU. So interesting area here.
For those interested, Confidential Spaces is Google Cloud's offering here based on AMD SEV. Leemon, quick thoughts from you on this topic, and then we'll go to Mo.
Privacy is critical. AI right now, if you have to go to a website that runs a neural network for you, you have zero privacy, regardless of what they promise. Homomorphic encryption would be wonderful and would solve it all, and I spent way too many hours many years ago working on homomorphic encryption. Now we have it solved, and no one can use it because it is so inefficient. I'm not going to hold my breath to get homomorphic encryption able to run giant neural networks. I'm just not going to hold my breath on that. However, the good news is that it takes the truly powerful neural network hardware to train the neural network in the first place. Once it's trained, you can run it on a much less powerful computer. And there's even work being done showing maybe it's even order of magnitude less powerful than we thought you can get away with.
That's right.
And I think what we're going to see is that your phone and your laptop are going to have more and more silicon devoted to running neural networks. And the only way to have privacy with AI is you keep it within your own device. And we're going to see that. And that's going to be very important. And so I'm optimistic about privacy. I think Web3 ledgers have a huge thing to offer to privacy. And I think AI will catch up, especially as the hardware catches up. But privacy, we have to have privacy. Let's not create a dystopia. Let's create a utopia. We have to have privacy.
Thanks, Leemon. And so, Mo, something you and I have discussed in the past around this topic, but perhaps linking this to the application in the business world is around identity, credentialing. And so, imagine this world where you have in your wallet a credential which has your private information, but now we have the silicon in your phone that can run the LLM locally for you, and that agent is permissioned to access your private data in your secure enclave, potentially on your device. Imagine it's an LLM that you can ask questions for it to go and do things. What do you think about this possible future, and what are the business applications that you can imagine could come from this?
I mean, the answer to that question is, the possibility is endless. And I think it creates opportunity and access for people that have these devices, essentially, right? As the software continues to become commoditized and available, you'll see vast amounts of parties being able to participate in these systems, whether it's someone who wants to be a developer or someone who has a few dollars and wants to invest in financial markets, as long as they're available to them. And so on that secure enclave, I might have all my preferences that I want to share with that device. It could be now taking in public information that's verified on chain, similar to what you mentioned. Market dynamics within, what's happening in NASDAQ or within the London Stock Exchange.
Right.
Now, based on my risk appetite and all my attribution that I'm willing to share, again, with my device, because it is secure, I can say, hey, rebalance my portfolio. And I want to be able to do that in real time on a daily basis, maybe because I'm crazy and I want to be a high frequency trader. But I can be now. That's kind of the cool thing about it. And so, you can imagine anyone can now participate in financial systems. And, we've seen some similar trends with meme stocks. Now they might these people might have much more resources in real time to be able to just participate. And I think that's very powerful. Extending that, we're seeing, again, these use cases actually come to fruition today, whether it's someone like Franklin Templeton, who is tokenizing a money market fund on our protocol, to thinking about and seeing, what Larry Fink and BlackRock has said they're moving forward with tokenization efforts. First, starting off with things like a Bitcoin ETF, but of course you can imagine creating, financial instruments. You might be willing to share information with your asset manager now to get better products, and so that you're now building a much more better symbiotic relationship with the enterprises and the partners that whoever you may be working with. Sure. And so that's kind of on the retail-facing side. But I think equally important will be on the B2B side. Okay. You have large enterprises, again, that might be looking to secure a supply chain, for example. And it's quite competitive because you're out there, trying to navigate what might, make you successful versus your competitor. And if you have that information, and again, in a secure way, are willing to share it, you might be able to, again, procure a supply chain in a more efficient way relative to your peers and lead to better business outcomes.
Thanks, mate. So we have a few minutes left. Arthur, anything you'd like to add onto the business use cases of this point? So I'm thinking here, if I have a digitally signed document in my wallet, I have a number of them, I can pick fields of information and selectively disclose them to another service provider. And maybe not even have to give them the raw information, maybe just give them facts about that information, like true or false. Mm-hmm. This is, when combined with an agent, I feel that there's a lot that an AI agent who could maybe help negotiate for me and give me the final approval at the end, to Leemon's point. What are your thoughts on this? And do you think that this is a real future or something that we might not see for a while?
I think maybe if we're talking about agents and to specify a lot of the systems we have now in AI that people may be using, like ChatGPT, they're not agentic. They answer questions. They don't go out in the world and do stuff.
That's right.
And people have hacked them together to be a little more agentic by saying hey, here's how you make a request to the internet. Here's how you go through my email. And it's sort of work, but it doesn't quite work very well. But I think it's going to get better. And if you think of people having a bunch of AI as agents, and the agents are trying to do things with you, well, they're going to be able to do things via APIs. But it's interesting because if you want to have a contract today, it's not very convenient to have a contract. You need to be a legal person. You need to be within a specific legal framework, draft the contract, sign it, and how do you enforce it is slow. So if you have a bunch of AI agents who actually want to do contracts with each other, it's reasonable to use a smart contract. It's a much more reasonable technology to use, or even make a payment. It's not impossible. They could go and sign up for a payment account with some payment provider. But again, you need a legal personhood if you want to do all the things. So maybe they do it on your behalf, but it's just so much faster and easier to just use a cryptocurrency for making your payment, use a smart contract. It's there, it works, and it's machine accessible as opposed to requiring this notion of legal personhood. So that's, I think, something we might see.
I think in business we're going to see that as ledgers tokenize everything and start to create little markets. So instead of my factory buying supplies from one supplier that I have a year-long contract with, I have an actual market for the parts. And in real time, it's constantly buying them.
Right.
Ledgers make this possible. But then you could have AI helping me negotiate well in that little tiny market that was created just for the suppliers of my factory. And I think we may see more and more of that as we get disintermediation and as we get more people involved with Web3, making it more open to people. It also makes it more open to people who are using an AI to help them navigate these waters. We're going to see both.
Lovely answer. So thank you all for listening. Hopefully you found this insightful and informative. And thank you very much to our three panelists, Mo, Arthur, and Leemon. It's a pleasure having you here with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.